I'm Maggie. I'm a licensed clinical psychotherapist with degrees in psychology, theology, and marriage and family therapy, a national certification in dialectical behavioral therapy, and a national certification in integrative mental health. In this video, I'm not looking to diagnose anyone. I'm only willing to offer insight into situations like these. Maggie Thompson is presenting the work titled The Book of Knowledge, The Keys of Enoch, written by J.J. Hurtak. Maggie Thompson is not validating nor supporting Hurtak's views, epiphanies, visions, beliefs, or words. Maggie Thompson is simply presenting the work as written and is attempting to translate this extraordinarily esoteric work to a common vernacular and understanding. Further, Maggie Thompson understands this work to be solely concerning the Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and while Hurtak views his work to be the key or keys to uniting all the world's people under one religion, namely Abrahamic, Maggie Thompson does not support this premise whole cloth. However, this work does give depth and insight into the connection of physics, cosmology, biology, and spirituality, which, for the seeker of divine truth, can be invaluable for the discovery of one's place in the universe, and that may be under the hierarchy of Yahweh, the Ancient of Days, or a hierarchy that exists above or beside such deities, or none altogether. Maggie Thompson implores all seekers of knowledge to, letter A, not accept what a person of authority tells you without validation. This includes looking at critiques and the opposing views with an open mind. Letter B, accept that religion, as well as science and politics, is presented as a means of indoctrination and is always presented with the biases of the overall field or system, the authors of texts, and the presenter, whose goals are to convince you of the, quote, truth, end quote, of their premise or premises. Letter C. It is possible to take insight, truths, and information from a biased work. Any body of work for the purpose of deeper meaning and knowledge must be carefully excavated and carved to glean wisdom. And letter D. No work or bodies of work that is believed by a large group or populace of people should be dismissed out of hand simply because you do not believe it. We live in a diverse time where religious belief takes center stage in the governing of the collected masses. To truly understand the barriers and gateways to your personal success and fulfillment, you must accept that believers of any kind can and will do what is necessary to meet their goals. All right, y'all got that? All right. This key says, the key languages connecting mind-time warps to interconnecting civilizations and manifestations of higher evolution in our time zone are Egyptian, Hebrew, Sanskrit, Tibetan, Chinese. The second key, so that was key 1-1-0. The next key 1-1-1 is the throne energies are the sacred names that can take you into the pyramid and show you the million myriads of pyramids, all interrelated into the throne of the divine. Phew. So for this show, this particular one, shout out to Y'all Borgen, because he gave me an idea to try, which is that the Monday before the Wednesday show, I would put out kind of a short with just the keys so people could hear that ahead of time. and I would put out a full text reading that then goes into a playlist that's on my channel. So all of the Book of Knowledge stuff is in a playlist now. So for the people who want to hear the full text prior to the breakdown, they can do that. And that keeps me free from spending 35, 45 minutes just reading to you guys. So we're trying it this week. I kind of liked it, just doing it that way and knowing that I have a lot more time to do a lot more of a breakdown. So I have a lot of stuff to show you guys. So I'm kind of excited about that. So tell me if you like it. Tell me if you hate it. And we'll see. So let's say hi to the best live tribe on YouTube. Adric Hopoit is first. He says it's on. Nina Williams in here with hi and the peace sign. My favorite auntie. Cutting up with the Joneses is here. He's here for the live. He says greetings to Maggie and the chat. Thank you for being here. Adrian Hicks is here. He says, let's go. Armando is here. Peace to you as well. Adrian says that is about as thorough a disclaimer as can be had. Listen, I wanted the whole thing in there. I don't want to have to disclaim a bunch of stuff every single time or say what we're talking about, since this is a multi-part thing. So it's just better to have it pre-recorded. Spainman is here. Greetings to you as well. Rael is here. Hi. So thank you guys for being here. I'm super excited. For those of you that wanted to hear the full text reading, hopefully you had time to do that. If you didn't, it's fine to do the breakdown and then go back and do the reading too, because you'll have a different understanding of the reading after we break it down. Because things that are esoteric to me make me think of a lot of questions, or things in the text will remind me of something. So while I'm not reading the whole thing, there's a couple things that stood out that kind of helped me. So in 1-1-0, the very first thing he says is, we're told in this key that if we interconnect the languages of Egyptian, Hebrew, Sanskrit, Tibetan, Chinese, we will be mentally interconnected with civilizations representing the higher evolution. This totally made me think of the Tower of Babel, where so the story goes in the Bible that, everybody's connected. All the humans are together in one place, and they start building this tower, possibly of science and knowledge, to reach God. In Sunday school, they say, they wanted to talk to God directly. As you get older and you learn things, it's like, possibly sciences, cosmology, whatever. But, the thing about the Tower of Babel is then God said, they have become like us, which is another thing I quote when people talk about monotheism, is because God uses the word we and us quite often. And unless he is British monarchy who refers to himself as we, I don't think it applies. Although people will say that, that it's the royal we. But God says, that they have become like us. And so God, in his wisdom, so that humans cannot be like them, through whatever technology was getting them into the sky, he dispersed everybody across the earth and changed their languages so that they can't talk to each other and do that again. So it made me think of the Tower of Babel. So I'm going to share screen here. So this shows you the Tower of Babel. Genesis chapter 11, 1-9, right? And this is supposed to explain the diversity of languages and culture. And this is supposedly right after the Great Flood, when everybody is settling in the land of Shinar, which is supposedly Sumeria. Okay. Now, as we know, and maybe you don't, but if you're into this stuff, our archaeologists have already said there's been great floods across the earth. Every ancient culture has a flood myth. Every ancient culture with a flood myth also has a guy showing up in a boat after the flood to teach them technology. Um, so everybody wasn't in Shinar, obviously. Okay. So that's Babel. Okay. So that it made me think of that because now he's saying you have to take all these ancient languages and shove them back together to evolve your consciousness. And it's sort of like, well, did God disperse everybody and gave everybody different languages because he didn't want them doing that? Or now he wants them to put them all back together because he says Egyptian, Hebrew, Sanskrit, Tibetan, Chinese, which is where all these civilizations were. Now, an interesting thing that I have been mulling around is how ancient peoples, their origin myths always have to do with a mountain. Okay. So, we have Mount Ararat, Mount Meru, Kilimanjaro, um, Shasta. So a lot of these very, very ancient cultures, their origin myths, and use myths lightly, their origin stories have to do with mountains. And so I went down a rabbit hole of geology and geography and history and one of the things that I asked, and tried to figure out, and I had to work with ChatGPT a little bit because it's a if then scenarios, is if these mountains that are supposedly where God resides, right? In all these different places, if they all came from the exact same land in Pangea. So if you don't know what Pangea is, at one point all of the land on earth was one land mass and it broke apart, which again made me think of the Tower of Babel, right? It all broke apart and all these people developed different languages. Now, there's many millions of years between Pangea breaking apart and the first known human. Uh, That's just the history that we have. But it made me wonder if all of these mountains actually came from the same spot in Pangea, and interestingly enough, they do. They all came from the same exact spot in Pangea, these particular mountains. And so that's something interesting to think about. I'm now plotting those, and those mountains are actually on, the ley lines of the earth, the energy grid, the meridians and all that. All of those mountains are on nodes of ley lines. So all of that is just very, very interesting. And I hope you guys find it interesting. Either that, or you can listen to me babble about things about the Tower of Babel. Leon is here. He says, hey, Spain Man says, I always struggled with that story. It's counterintuitive to what we're supposed to believe God is, among many struggles. Oh, yeah. I mean, Old Testament God versus New Testament God, that, my opinion, they are two different gods. Two different gods. And the documentary that I'm working on is a two-parter, and that will all come out. Bloodlines will come out, and that all of that will come out. All of the who are thee and who were thee that I'm doing are kind of precursors to the documentary. So we'll talk about that. So interestingly enough, I don't know if it makes you guys think of the Tower of Babel, because I look at biblical stories and the very first thing I do is think to myself, what if that was true and that did happen? Okay. Even angels flying around, Nephilim coming down, all the stuff that we don't think could even happen. Giants, whatnot, Okay. So I kind of do it almost like Greek discourse and Greek debates, where it's like, if it's all true, I have to try to figure out how to prove it's all true. But then there's also times I'm like, what if it's a metaphor? Because they tell you all the time it's all a metaphor, except for when it's not a metaphor and then it's literal. and you never can tell which one you're supposed to believe, whether it's a metaphor or it's literal and it changes and whatnot. But you know, if there was a place on Pangea when everybody was together and all spoke the same language, that was sort of this holy place that then got split into these different mountains, and this is where these people kind of found God. It's an interesting premise. Cutting up with the Joneses said, I always thought Old Testament God is a man relationship with the harsh reality of nature. I always thought Old Testament God sounded a lot like a narcissist. That's just me. He's very worship me, love me, but kill people. If you do it, it's bad. If I do it, it's okay, and lots of gaslighting. So, but I was not raised Christian, so that's it's a little bit different for me. I did go with friends like to Sunday school and stuff. I asked too many questions and irritated pastors though. So Spain Man says, I think of it the same way indigenous people described the Europeans and describing things in the best context they could. Right. And I think about too, like if you're writing down very serious stories, if you are putting it into a stone tablet, if you are putting it into scrolls that you are then going to seal and put in a cave, you want them to stand the test of time. And so it's kind of like in this day and age when I'm going to give a speech or I have to give a talk or I'm writing a paper for the populace, they always say write something at an 8th grade level. And so using metaphors and using stories and saying it's like this and that kind of thing, it sort of makes sense that they would tell it in a story form or it would be metaphorical. Or now certain scrolls, certain letters or whatever, those are going to be literal because they're letters from one person to another person. So Cutting Up says New Testament is man's relationship with other men. Compassionate and Callous is here. Hi, it's been a while. Thank you for being here. Spain Man says temperamental. Yeah. There's just, for me, looking at it from a psychological standpoint, there is a lot of delusions of grandeur and gaslighting that happens in the Old Testament. Now, is that God's fault or is that the people that wrote it's fault? I don't know. I wasn't there, but I'm just saying it's very present in the Old Testament. Very, very present in the Old Testament. So, I don't know if that makes you guys think of the Tower of Babel, because now I've got questions, right? Like, I thought we weren't supposed to all speak the same language to try to reach God. And her talk is now saying combine all these languages to reach God. I thought we got in trouble for that before. So, I don't know. And I've said before that, her talks hierarchy and office of the Christ and all that is very much like the TVA in Disney. That's why we've used it. And so it's up to you to decide if the TVA was right or if it was wrong. Okay. By the way, at the very end of this, we're going to talk about the CIA. This is how deep I got into this stuff. So, so let's talk about Loki. So for key 1-1-0, using Loki, we see the TVA as an organization that enforces the sacred timeline, okay? Just like her talk step is enforcing the human consciousness evolution, okay? So when they're enforcing the sacred timeline, they're pruning variant timelines that deviate from a predetermined path that the TVA wants, okay? This aligns that all aligns with key 1-1-0, which discusses the divine fire as a purifying force that burns away impurities and aligns consciousness with divine will. So this is the same thing as pruning. This purifying fire is pruning what they deem impurities and aligns consciousness with the divine will of them. Okay, so it's the same thing. The TVA's reset charges, if you guys remember the reset charges, which erase entire timelines, right, can be seen as a metaphor for this fire, right? It cleanses the multiverse of the chaos or the disorder or the evolution that this divine group, this office of the Christ, doesn't like. Adrian Hicks says, which God? Baal, Yahweh, El. Well, for her talk, it's Yahweh. Now, again, the documentary is coming out and we will talk about Yahweh. So it's Yahweh that he's talking about, which will, if you guys watch, once I finally do get that out, because these are going to be very long. they are long and they have a lot of detail, because I'm trying to prove something here. You may look at JJ Hertog's book a little bit different after the documentary. So we'll see. And there's so much syncretizing throughout history where like this God became that God, became that God, became that God, that I don't know. But that Hertog says it's Yahweh. Okay. Oh, Adrian says talking about the combining languages to speak to God part. It's Old Testament and Genesis. So that might have been El or Elohim, because they didn't start using Adonai or Yahweh until later in the Old Testament. And in fact, in the New Testament, you guys can double check me. In the New Testament, Jesus, nor any of the disciples, none of them ever say the word Yahweh or talk about Yahweh. And in fact, Jesus tells the Jews, your father is not my father. Like, your God is not my God. Your God is the devil. My God is the Father. Jesus said that. Okay. And they were at that time worshiping Yahweh. So, I don't know which God it was. Leon says, I'll be there for the documentary. I'm waiting on that Saturn combo. Yeah, I'm going to bring up Saturn. It's a little bit secondary, interestingly enough. The more you dig into it, Saturn is more of some of the rituals and not as much of the power, interestingly enough. Kind of what the Joneses said. I saw a video explaining that the pronunciation of Yahweh is an inhale and exhale. Huh. I never heard that before. I've always heard it YHWH, which is the unknown representation, like sacred geometry. So in Judaism, everything has a name. I'm sorry, everything has a number. Every word has a number, right? And so they always used the geometry and the mathematics and numerology. Numerology is huge in Judaism. And so like you have to know the number of your name always. And like how your birth year adds up and all these kind of things. And so the YHWH, the way it is explained is that it's the number of a name that we don't get to know. Okay, so that's what it stands for. However, Yahweh as a God with that exact name existed before the rise of Judaism. It existed. It was written about by ancient Egyptians about a nomadic tribe that worshipped Yahweh, which was the Shasu. And they said Yahweh. So it wasn't some indefatigable number of a name that we can never know. It was Yahweh. And he was like the 13th son of Ra, and he was a lesser storm god. So, yeah. Spainman says, ain't that something? Shake my head. LOL. Thinking about current news. Yes. So I kind of want to point you back to this last Sunday where I talked about where the Natufian Empire was. and relate it to that region now, like current, what is going on specifically about that region now. So we know that it's important. Spainman says, didn't mean to put that I there. Okay, so these are reset charges. Okay, this divine fire are the reset charges. So when things start to veer off from what this divine entity, which her talk says is Yahweh, when things veer off from that, they set it on fire. It's a reset charge. They set it on fire, they get rid of it. So key 1-1-0 teaches that the divine fire is not just a destructive force, but a transformative one, purifying the consciousness and preparing it for higher spiritual initiation. So the interesting thing about him saying purifying consciousness is that throughout the Bible, throughout the history of the Abrahamic religions, and even socially, we see demonization of knowledge over and over and over and over and over. In fact, I was listening to someone. So, at about the same time that it came out that the Mesopotamians and the Sumerians were Black African, and this after, kind of the straight-laced Christianity said that Noah landed on Mount Ararat, okay, which is Mesopotamia. And so for them, Shinar meant Sumeria. So that's what they've been saying. Shinar meant Sumeria. So that would mean when the sons went to find wives to create their lineage, they married Black African women. Okay. Now, you know how they've always said that then the Hamites, the Black people who made Africa, right? And King Nimrod, who, the Tower of Babel and blah, 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 blah. So it came out, right, that they were all Black. Okay. It wasn't, just Ham married a Black woman. They all would have had to, right? And so now there's this narrative that all of this knowledge that came out of these kingdoms that came from Mesopotamia and Sumeria, Persia and all these places, even Kemet, right? The precursor was Sumeria. And so now they're coming out and saying, well, Cain, Cain, who was still alive and survived the flood, gave these bad people all this knowledge so they could worship science. And God hates you worshiping science and having all this knowledge. And that's why you dispersed at the Tower of Babel. And it's like, God hates knowledge? So I think about that when I hear this purifying your consciousness, right? Like burning out all your knowledge. It's sort of like being red pilled, right? Like the Matrix. Once you know, you can't not know, unless apparently a divine being sets your brain on fire and purifies your consciousness, and then you don't know it anymore. And so you're then prepared for higher spiritual initiation. So that's just what that makes me think of. So in Loki, the TVA's mission to maintain the sacred timeline reflects this idea of purification. Okay, so the timekeepers and he who remains from Loki can be seen as representations of those higher intelligences. We've talked about that before. So like he who remains is the Ancient of Days, right? And like Miss Minutes is probably like Metatron. So they are the representation of these higher intelligences who use divine fire to guide the evolution of the multiverse. Leon's getting a kick out of it. I love it. Okay, so in key 1-1-1, this one gets wild for me, as if that wasn't wild enough, where I'm like, that's the Tower of Babel. Catnap with the Joneses says, does the divine fire burn ideology or indoctrination? Well, it's just saying it burns off a course. When you get off course, it gets purified by fire. Okay. But, um, it's supposed to transform you. That was the word. It's transformative. Sam C. Hi, Sam C. Thank you for being here. He's a super dope series, as always. Thank you. So, key 1-1-1 and Loki, we see the characters like Loki and Sylvie, right? They undergo profound transformations as they uncover the truth about the TVA, right? That's what the whole series is about, right? So, I've talked about this before. When Loki first gets to the TVA and realizes that he can't use his powers, that he's actually being detained, like him, Loki. Um, he shrinks some, you know, but as it goes on and he learns more and he gets more confidence and he's like, something's got to be done and we got to do this. And, they go through this transformation. They kind of settle into their own identities. So that aligns with key 1-1-1. So that discusses the spiritual initiation as a process of like awakening to higher consciousnesses and aligning with divine will. You always have to, in a lot of these religious things, is that at the end of the day, no matter what happens, you have to align your will with God's will. If you don't want, see, and need everything the same exact way as a one monotheistic God, then you're terrible. So, the journey of Loki and Sylvie can be seen as a metaphor for the stages of this spiritual initiation. So, you know how, like, in every episode, there was some challenge, something they had to get beyond, but always it gave them a little more information for what was going on, right? So, for her talk, it's like the soul is being tested over and over again. It's being purified over and over again, and ultimately transformed into exactly the divine's will. Okay. So, key 1-1-1 teaches that spiritual initiation is a necessary step in the evolution of consciousness, that it's guiding the soul through various stages of awakening. And in Loki, the TVA's trials and challenges serve as these initiatory tests, right? Pushing Loki and Sylvie to confront their fears, doubts, and limitations. Cutting Up with the Joneses says spiritual awakening equals detaching from ego. I don't disagree with you. I'm not sure how her talk would feel about it though. Um, the ultimate revelation of he who remains at the end, right, as the architect of the TVA mirrors the idea in this key 1-1-1 that these higher intelligences oversee the process of spiritual initiation leading to the Ancient of Days, ensuring that the soul evolves, but only in alignment with their divine principles. So you're not free to develop. So again, that's why I say you have to decide, was the TVA right? Was the TVA wrong? Was the TVA good? Was it bad? Was it neutral? Were they just doing what they had to do in the moment? You have to decide that, and especially because everybody that worked at the TVA, they weren't all evil people, you know, they were operating under the information that they had to work with. Because remember, spoiler alert, we learned that a lot of people that worked at the TVA actually had been variants that had to be pruned. And the way to prune them was to take them, remove their memory, and plug them into the TVA as workers. So their consciousness was purified. Okay. So what if the TVA's mission is not just about timelines, but about initiation into something bigger? What if every spiritual initiation type ritual, like baptism, prayers, communion, getting married in a church, blah, 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 and reset charges all just move you from the path and the trajectory that you were on? that somebody is putting up like the bumpers on the bowling lane to get you to where they want you to be. And is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Okay. But my thing is who should be prescribing your reset charges? I think about that a lot, right? Like if I'm going to have a deity or deities that I believe in, and I believe in some of all of them, but I think organized religion actually is detrimental. Um, but as far as belief systems, I believe some of a lot of them. Um, but I have to think about if I'm going to offer all my energy and worship and give my life, who am I giving it to? And do I want that entity to be the one that's prescribing my reset charges and is really moving me in the direction that they want me to be instead of maybe where I would have wanted to go? So I have to think about that. So let's talk about the CIA. Because one of the things that her talk talks about is this breathing, right? I have to find it now because he talks about this breathing. He does talk about the great I am consciousness, light pictographs. Hold on, I'll find the breathing. Time cells. There's tons of time cells. He talks about a bunch of time cells. He talks about telethought communication. I don't remember exactly where it was at. I just didn't highlight it, but he does talk about breathing in a certain way. And so, I'm sorry I didn't highlight it. That was my bad. But what that reminded me of in this breathing, that he's talking about, the special breathing and the names and the whatnots, it totally threw me to the CIA Gateway Project, which I've talked about on this channel before. But the CIA, for a very long time, had the Gateway Project where they were studying like um, telekinesis, telepathy, um, what do you call it when your body is here and your consciousness goes somewhere else? My gosh, I can't think of the word for it. But they were studying all that stuff. And so like some people were taking LSD, other people were doing other things. They had this whole gateway project. They discovered a bunch of stuff, which again, I always go back to, it's fine when they do it. It's weird when you do it, right? Like they've known about UFOs forever and ever, amen. And everybody who believed in UFOs was made to seem psycho. And then they come out with all this stuff. Oh yeah, no, we know about UFOs. We know about aliens. We've always known. Okay. Well, the Gateway Project talks about how our reality is a toroidal field, a torus is a toroidal field, and how the energy flows and all these kind of things that they discovered using all of the science, right? They discovered how to make telepathy work. It wasn't that great. Um, they discovered how to see into other dimensions, which we've talked about on the light spectrum here before. If you want to reach that, watch that one. It's the one about where you see monsters, demon-based syndrome. So one of the things that they did during this, gathering all this information, were these breathing techniques, right? Astral projection. Thank you. Cutting up with the Joneses. Thank you. And remote viewing. Yes, because they did do remote viewing. They did astral projection. The remote viewing had a lot to do with being able to spy on people, and they had some success with some of the stuff that they did. And remember when I did the show, they worked with the Monroe Institute, and the Monroe Institute is still in operation today, right? But again, it's fine when they do it. It's woo-woo and psychotic when the rest of the people do it. Okay. So that's why usually if I'm going to talk about this stuff, I will pull the CIA files and say, see, it's a thing. It's a thing, not just, a bunch of people talking about it. Um, Hi, Eddie. Thank you for being in here. It says, oh, I remember the Gateway Project. I saw the documentary way back. Sam C says, I'm going to have to check that CIA project out. Spain Man says, imagine turning our soul into a government asset number. Um, and then you have to think too, are spirit and soul two different things? Cutting up with the Joneses says remote viewing. Isn't that what they were doing in Stranger Things? Well, think back to Stranger Things. It is based on the Monroe Institute. So, yes, Stranger Things is based on the story of the Monroe Institute. Okay, so I want to show you guys this. I want to share this with you. Oh, I got to stop that one and open up a new one. Okay, Gateway. There we go. Okay, so this is, look at the website. Hopefully you guys can see it, cia.gov. Okay, this is where this comes from, cia.gov. Now, this was not approved for release until 2003 in September. It is from the Monroe Institute of Applied Scientists. This is the intermediate workbook. This is not the advanced workbook. It's also not the introductory. So this is when they had their soldiers going through these gateway trainings. This right here is the intermediate workbook. Okay. Now, and it says you can only do it if you've completed the first session of the gateway program, right? If you try to do this without doing it, you're going to have undesirable and uncontrolled effects detrimental to any such unauthorized users. Isn't that wild? Now, this gateway stuff started in the 50s. This is copyrighted 1977. So when I say they did it for years, that's what I mean. So what's the first thing they talk about? Affirmations. Wait, I thought it was silliness and it was goofy and it's fluff and it's nothing when the average person says affirmations. And we're not supposed to take it seriously. These are soldiers, folks. These are military soldiers going through these programs. And the first thing that they're told to do in the intermediate course is that you have to say the first affirmation, then you say the second affirmation. And what is the first sentence? I am more than my physical body. I am more than physical matter. I can perceive that which is greater than the physical world. Think about that. These are soldiers and they have put 20 years worth of soldiers through this because of the stuff they have proven. And this is the first thing you do in the intermediate book is these affirmations, right? And the first thing you say is, I'm more than my physical body and I'm more than physical matter. And I can perceive that which is greater than the physical world, right? We're setting the affirmation, right? We've talked about that before. You set the affirmation and it puts something into the universe that then comes back to you. The second one, I open this channel of communication only to those whose knowledge, wisdom, development, and experience is equal or greater than my own. So we're doing these affirmations to open ourselves up to something beyond the physical world and hoping to get information back from something that has equal or greater knowledge, wisdom, and development and experience. So I restrict contact and communication to constructive purpose and reject all other. I open such channel only when I do so consciously desire. At all other times, it will remain closed. So these are things, literally somebody's saying this out loud and they know that by saying these things out loud, it does something. Okay. Leon says, telling me about UFOs like it's the first or last thing I should be worried about. Yeah. Yeah. Like they waited until literally nobody cared, right? Spain Man says, I got to read this. Oh, yeah. read the entirety of all of the gateway projects, it tells you what the nature of the matrix is. It's a toroidal field, right? Adrian says, I mean, it is silly affirmations, but government. I personally think affirmations work. I think putting something positive into the universe bounces back to you, right? Saying something positive to yourself does change the way you see things. It's sort of like your body doesn't know the difference between nervous and excited. You have to tell it which one is better because the chemical responses that your body does between nervous and excited are the same, but the way to insulate yourself is how you frame it. So they work. Now, are these ones, I don't know that I would do these because they're like they said, you don't necessarily want to start on step 5. But opening a channel to something and you don't know what it is, just that it's smarter than you, I don't know that I would be cool with that. It'd be like, hey, I need to be possessed by a demon or whatever, wants to come in. So the gateway notes, you may want to refer to the following notes for your exercise sessions. Remember that these are but guidelines. We strongly encourage you to use your own ideas and ingenuity during your exercise sessions. So here we go with the breathing. As you start each exercise, do your resonant breathing exercise, and then it tells you what the resonant breathing exercise is. Okay, inhale deeply, pulling in energy, right? Again, it's psycho if other people do it. It's normal if they do it. Pulling in energy from all parts of your physical body up to and then into your head. So this is just visualizing. You're breathing in, you're pulling all this energy up into your head. Hold your breath for a comfortable length of time, eventually holding it to the count of 10. Swirling the energy around in your brain, just visualizing this, right? Then exhale slowly through your mouth as though you were slowly and easily blowing out a candle. At the same time, imagine that you are expelling stale, used up energy through the bottoms of your feet. So you've got all this good energy going on up here, and you're pushing all the bad energy into the earth. By the way, metaphysicians have been saying this, I don't know, since the time of Plato, to push bad energy into the earth, and they called that grounding. So when people talk about grounding, that's what that means. So let's see, on the second inhale, bring the new fresh energy to your upper chest and arms. Exhale the stale used up energy from the abdomen down. On the third, bring the new energy to the abdomen. On the fourth, to the pelvic. These are chakras, by the way, guys. These are chakras. Then we go beyond the chakras to the thighs and the knees. On the fifth and on the sixth, the lower legs and feet. It's as if we're filling an inverted jar full of new, fresh energy in 6 steps. So that is that resonant breathing exercise, right? Place all your problems and distractions in the security repository box. By the way, that's something in your mind. We learned that in the first workbook, that you have a box in your mind that when you're going to do these exercises, you take like all your problems, all your worries, anything that's going to distract you, whatever, and you visualize putting it in a box, shutting it, locking it, setting it to the side. It'll be there when we go back and get it. Say the affirmation while bringing back your strong desire to expand yourself and explore, know, and understand, control, and use the non-physical energies most beneficial for you and those around you. As in all affirmation, the words mean nothing without the feeling, right? It's the intention, right? Then they talk about reaching focus 10 from consciousness, right? Returning to C1 from focus 10. If you end up interacting with something wackadoo, scary, harmful, whatever, they have an emergency return to C1, which just has to do with like showing yourself that you are physical in the physical world, like move something, right? Creating an energy bar tool to use, create and use a living body map, balance, cleanse, and recharge emotional body map, perceiving distant events. And here's the remote viewing, guys. Getting to focus 12 and how to return, which is expanding your awareness, problem solving. We're using spatial orientation. We're doing the rebalance, right? So all of this is from the CIA. And so her talk reminded me of that as he's talking about the breathing, the fire, the purging, the consciousness, the da 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 da, right? Now, at the same time he's writing this book, the CIA is doing this stuff. Okay. Now again, it wasn't released until the 2000s, right? So what's the copyright again? 1977 for her talk's book. Now, is it the collective consciousness? Like all this stuff was going on in the CIA and somehow it gets into the collective consciousness and now other people are getting these messages the same way these soldiers are who are doing these other things? Was her talk part of it? I don't know, but it's weird that it's all was happening at the same time, right? Adrian says, I'm joking. I know. Sam C says, I wonder if they had the same system as Carl Jung's interviewees for his Red Book entries. I don't quite know what you mean. I have Red Book and I've read the Red Book. I'm trying to think back now when Jung was it was a little bit of hypnosis and self-hypnosis. This one is a little more energy grid based, but there are overlaps for sure. Adrian says, go touch grass. Plato. Yes, Plato was the first one who said, go touch grass. And I tell people this a lot, that as humans, we don't ground anymore. And, people have weaponized the go touch grass. Going and standing in the grass barefooted is so good for you that I hate that it's been weaponized, because as human beings, just walking in the grass and the dirt, things like that, we absorb minerals from the ground that we need by osmosis. We're also grounding our energy. We are full of energy. That is a scientific fact. And we can ground that energy. You guys know how grounding works in electricity, right? It goes into the earth, right? Humans are the same thing. So we ground our energy, we get minerals, and plus being outside, getting fresh air. Fresh air is always good for you. Being in the sunshine increases your vitamin D, can increase your mood. Like all these things on touching grass is so good for you and such an amazing thing that you should do for yourself as part of taking care of yourself. I hate that it's been weaponized. I hate that. And Plato probably was the first one. But I did have a point because Plato made me think of it. Our shoes always used to not block us from grounding because leather, we can still ground through leather, cork, wood, reeds, all of those things, these natural elements, we can still ground with the earth having these shoes on. But as soon as we started having plastic and rubber shoes, that is an insulator and it prevents you from grounding. So even if you're walking outside with your rubber soled shoes on, you are not grounding. You have to take your shoes off or wear a shoe with a natural sole that is not rubber or plastic or insulating of some kind. Sam C says, how did they get this knowledge? Well, what they started doing and working with the Monroe Institute starting in the 50s, they had all these ideas. And the way think tanks used to work was, what if, and they would come up with something wild and they would try to prove whether it exists or doesn't. And so, they're working with the Monroe Institute and they're like, hey, the best way to spy on people is to be psychic. And so they started all of these experiments, all this science. They had these labs, the top scientists, they had soldiers doing things. They And like I say, this went on for a very long time. And so they got the knowledge through all of the science that they did to learn the knowledge. Catnap says, my shoes are the last thing on and first thing off. I totally agree. I cannot stand wearing shoes. um, I would much prefer to not to, but the world is not made up that way. I'm literally thinking back to when I had to go after my dog recently, and because she ran out of the house following another dog, and um, I was barefooted because I was in the house, and so I take off after her, and I end up stepping in somebody's yard that's just filled with stickers. And I really hated that I was barefoot in that moment. Although it still was not fun running barefooted down a street, a concrete street was not the most comfortable thing in the world because occasionally you hit rocks and that's not the best. But, leaping into that yard full of stickers and thorns was absolutely atrocious. It was terrible. Terrible. Nina says, grounding has changed my life. Yeah, Auntie, I hope it's okay if I share this. They actually sell these like plates. It's not like a dinner plate, but it's just like a sheet that you can plug into the wall because all of the circuitry in the house is grounded, right? And you can just sit there like with your feet on it, um, but and ground your energy, in a pinch, if you can't get outside barefooted and all that, or, you don't have cork bottom or leather bottom shoes. But they also sell bed sheets that have this little plug-in, and the bed sheets are perfectly comfortable. They're, you can't tell, but what people are reporting are things like, their chronic aches and pains that they would get through the night, like have chronic knee pain or back pain or neck pain or all these different things. By using the grounding sheets, it's taking care of a lot of these chronic problems by grounding overnight. And Auntie turned me on to the grounding sheets. And I just hear amazing things about those things. And it's sort of like, if you can't get out and do it, because again, up until recently in the history of humanity, there was no such thing really as inside and outside. You know what I mean? Like, we had our shelters where we did some cooking and we got out of the weather, but for the most part, we were outside. And even inside was dirt floors. It was still outside. So, we don't really get the grounding that we as humans probably need. Leon says, Carl's Red Book is a good example of being on the edge of pissing off the government and people in power. What's really the difference between the anima and the animus compared to the masculine and feminine divina? Yeah. It's almost like he made an attempt to guide everyone towards fixing themselves and understanding the unheld self. Oh, so true. Because a lot of it was, he's just teaching people how to do it. And he would say a lot like, I don't have to help you to do that. These are just the things you do, you know? And he even said, you can do it this way, you can do it that way, you can do it through art, you can do it through talking, you can do it through meditation, you can do it through, right? That really upends, psychology as a whole. Hi, Cynical Optimist. Thanks for being here. Leon says plastic and rubber is mixed in our clothes and shoes. Yeah, for sure. Spain Man says, what's crazy is I thought about grounding just as I was coming home this evening. Oh, interesting. Synchronicity. Synchronicity. And Nina says, because of those sheets, my arthritis is gone. I'm glad you said it. I didn't want to give a lot of your information, but, for just changing to a different kind of sheets, it takes away arthritis. You know what I mean? And that's just grounding. And from my perspective, there's a lot of studies that show that grounding helps your mental health. It helps anxiety a ton, anger, depression, so many things that grounding has a positive effect on. And it's been studied 6 ways to Sunday. But again, here we have the CIA showing all these things and having all of this information. So I kind of go back to, we're just talking about Carl Jung in a specific way. Who should be prescribing your reset charges?
right? Who should be the one purifying your consciousness evolution? Who should be pruning your timeline? Who should be deciding what is a variant and what is not? Make sense? Leon says, Maggie, I have a friend in Dallas and she has a bed that has magnets in throughout the bed frame. Oh, that's interesting. And you remember back when, and it's still true, you started being able to buy stuff with copper in it. Like the copper knee brace and the copper bracelet for, carpal tunnel. And they started putting copper in all the different braces and stuff because they had all the good research that showed that copper helped all that. Well, anybody who knows electricity knows what copper does, right? It's grounding. Like think copper wires, right? It is a grounding mechanism. So interesting. But yeah, the magnets, there are more studies coming out about the magnets and moving magnetic energy throughout your body. So that's pretty interesting. Okay. So thank you all for being here. I hope that you like this format. You guys put a 1 in the chat if you like doing this format a little better. If you like the option to do the reading or listen to the reading in a different video ahead of time, and then we break it down during the show. If you like this format, we can go so much deeper. Let me see what you guys think. Because I like getting deeper. It harkens back to Pivot Point Wednesday, and that's what this is supposed to be, where we can get in deeper. We can talk about some weird stuff. We can get deep in the CIA if we need to. And my gosh, the next show, I've got so much for you guys. It's going to be longer than an hour. Try to plan accordingly if you want to stay for the whole thing. Okay, there's some ones. Armando says that was a great change. Okay, we'll keep doing that. Adrian says 1. I like this format. I feel like we're more connected with you and it's not a dissertation. Oh yeah, I could see that. Yeah, because me just reading to you just felt very disconnected anyway. And then I'm just like, and here's all the stuff about Loki. So I just wanted to get back to where we're having an exchange and we're getting deep into this weird stuff, this esoteric stuff. So makes me very, very happy. Leon says, it's whatever to me. Just don't get yourself in YouTube jail. You know what? My channel is small enough. I can still get away with a lot and I like it. So Armando said, yeah, I miss the weird and the tinfoil hat. Yeah. So if we do it this way, we can still get a little weird, a little tinfoil hat about this book. So instead of a variety of topics, we'll start getting weird and some tinfoil hat stuff about the book. So we'll do it that way. Thank you guys. You guys are the best live tribe on YouTube. I had so much fun tonight. I'm so glad to get back to the discussions and the interactions with you guys. I think that's going to be great moving on. So on Monday, the little short with just the key will come out, and then the full text reading will come out in preparation for Wednesday, which is, I believe it's called The Mind Face of God. Isn't that an interesting title? Yeah. The Mind Face of God is what is next Wednesday. This coming Sunday is Who Are the Khazarians? Notice I didn't say were, I say are. It's going to be charged. And I'm going to do my best not to be put in YouTube jail. But I'm going to say this to you guys because a lot of the live tribe is here. Not everybody, but a lot of you guys are here. Try to catch it if you can, because this may end up being a video that is removed by YouTube. So this one coming up this Sunday. So if you can be there, try to be there. If you want to try to, you guys have those downloaders, you might try to download it because it may get left up. Again, I'm such a small channel that it may get left up. But I very much foresee that it could also very well be something that YouTube removes. Probably not my whole channel because I've never really gotten in trouble before. So, I might get my first warning and I'm going to have disclaimers all over that sucker. So hopefully it stays up. But if it, just in case, you might want to try to be there. Spain Man says keep a backup. Armando says Patreon as well. Oh, I could put on Patreon, couldn't I? Yeah, I think it's a live. So I don't know how to go live on Patreon, but I can figure it out. Or as soon as the live is done, I can upload it over to Patreon. That way there is a copy. Spain Man says that, oh, only one group that could be. Yes, I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. So, all right. I want to empower you guys to seek knowledge from within. Hopefully I make that abundantly clear that the true source of your own resurrection, of your own consciousness evolution, of everything positive comes from within you. You may ask for help, you may lean on other people, you may learn knowledge, you may watch YouTube videos, you may do all of these things, but seek that divine knowledge from within yourself. Be the creator of your own life. And if you feel the need to co-create with a deity or some sort of higher power, really study who you're making this pact with. That's all I ask. That's all I ask. All right. I enjoyed you guys being here. If I don't see you this Sunday for the Khazarians, hopefully I see you next week for the mind face of God. Please like the video if you haven't already. It really helps the algorithm to know what kind of things you like. Share where you think it's appropriate, especially to someone who you think needs to hear it. And don't forget to check out some of the wilder Pivot Point Wednesday shows. And last, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, especially if you want to break down complex concepts that make the esoteric not so teric, helping you on your journey to become your most authentic self. By subscribing, you'll join a community that thrives on curiosity and growth, and you'll never miss out on insights and some wild discussions. Let's uncover the universe together. Bye.